One of the things that I talked about on the last episode of Scott's Thoughts is Disney, right? Disney kind of moving the goalpost on movie theaters, changing how they're doing things thanks to Disney Plus. And in a rare kind of show of unity, the National Association of Theater Owners writing a letter to Disney saying that, like, hey, you guys screwed up. You're costing us money. You cost you money. You could have released Black Widow in the movie theaters exclusively for a couple weeks, then released it on Disney Plus, because for a well-reviewed movie, and I looked this up right before we started, Black Widow has actually a really good rating on Rotten Tomatoes and all the other sites. For a well-reviewed movie, Black Widow had a 41% drop-off from Saturday to Sunday on people that went to go see it in the theater. Now, we can blame that on COVID. We can blame that on a lot of things. But considering that Disney Plus took in almost $60 million for people who opted to stay at home and watch Black Widow, and you figure there's 2, 3, 4, 5 people per household watching that movie, adjust for people that are a little COVID hesitant to go out in public, there's probably somewhere between 60 and $120 million that was left on the table for the movie theater owners that went to Disney Plus. And the movie theater owners are pissed about it. And sure enough, the fall off from day one to day two and weekend one to weekend number two was unprecedented for a well-reviewed movie, especially a Avengers, Marvel themed movie. And the theaters are pissed, right? And we talked about this in the last episode. We'll actually link to it below that, the business is changing. Disney has every right in the world to test out new business models, but are they cutting off their nose to spite their face because they want to really go all in on Disney Plus and this kind of like multi-channel day one release, Disney Plus, plus theaters, plus whatever? Well, now a new unforeseen problem has come about, and it actually affected Scarlett Johansson, who is Black Widow, in the release of Black Widow, and apparently it's affecting The Rock in the movie The Jungle Book. Uncertain if he's going to sue, but absolutely Scarlett Johansson, aka Black Widow, is suing Disney because her contract was set up where she got a much lower upfront base for acting in the movie Black Widow, but she got huge backside residuals based on the performance in the movie theater. Now, if you remember, famously, Robert Downey Jr. did this with the two Avengers Endgame and Infinity War movies, where he took a smaller base up front, and by smaller, I mean, whatever he made, 20 million instead of 40 million, but then he took points on the back end, and this is pretty common when you become a pretty big actor in Hollywood. You'll take points on the back end. So if you think about a movie production of all the money it makes, there's 100 points, and if you're the director, you might get 1 point. If you're the producer, you'll get 3 points. If you're this person, you'll maybe get a quarter of a point or a fraction or a point. This is actually how a lot of small time budget, like under $5 million movies are made, where a bunch of investors will get together and they'll say, okay, there's $5 million to make this movie. The person who wrote the script is bringing it to market, is maybe acting in it, producing it. They'll get 10 points. Now, if you're an investor, 5 million divided by 90, each point is assigned a dollar value. And then you get, future residuals based on the number of points that you own and how you invested in the movie up front. Well, big releases like Endgame are no different, right? So Robert Downey Jr. took points on the movie and said, okay, pay me a little bit less up front, but if this movie really knocks it out of the park and exceeds that, $200 million production budget, I want a percentage of the additional income once we go over the cost of the production budget. I think that movie made like $2 billion, or maybe you can look this up, Chris. You can look up what Endgame and Infinity Wars made in total revenue. I think worldwide revenue for Infinity Wars and Endgame was something like over $2 billion between the two of them. So he got a percentage of that. So for these actors who take points on the backside, it's really important to have a strong showing at the theater. And apparently, Chris, go for it. What'd they make?
Endgame made 2.79 billion. And what was the other one?
The other one was Infinity War. So the two movies combined made closer to like probably 4 or 5 billion. Jesus. That's
Infinity
insane.
War was 2.04 billion.
Okay, so they made 4.7 billion, and Robert Downey Jr. took points or residuals on the back end. Basically, they take out the production value, they take out this, they do some weird Hollywood accounting, and the rumor is that he made somewhere, depending on whose math you believe, somewhere between 90 million and like 150 million on those two movies because he took a lower salary or lower cost to do the movie up front, but then took points on the back end. Well, Scarlett Johansson was counting on those points on the back end of the theater release in order to supplement the lower salary or the lower payout that she took up front. And apparently The Rock did the same thing. Now, The Rock is trying to play nice and is not saying that he's going to sue Disney. I'm sure they're trying to figure out something behind the scenes because you don't want effectively the biggest movie star in the country right now bad mouthing your movie franchise or your movie studio. And interestingly, I thought like, ooh, maybe this was just some contract negotiation by Disney. Maybe this was like Scarlett Johansson's agent wasn't thinking and didn't, foresee this issue as the movie was being recorded because who knows there was going to be COVID and simultaneous release on TV. So maybe they just got outmaneuvered by Disney. But it turns out in Scarlett Johansson's contract, I was reading the contract that was linked to in this Yahoo Finance article or some other website that we were looking at. They did specifically say movie only to be released in theaters, right? Because that's where her revenue was going to be coming from. So Disney couldn't pull a fast one and go direct to DVD or direct to Disney Plus or whatever the case may be. So interesting that and keep in mind, by the way, you guys know I'm a libertarian. I'm all about businesses being able to do whatever they want or pivot however they want or try new business strategies. I do think it's stupid. I do agree with the Movie Theaters Association of America that they could keep a captive audience for those people that kind of want early access to the movie in the theater, and then they can release it on Disney Plus. I just think that's a better business model, but I'm sure there's people infinitely smarter than me with a bunch of MBAs that decided that that's not the best Disney model that they want to pursue. And businesses can do that, but you also can't violate contracts and screw over your employees, even if they're highly paid $10 million movie employees. So it's interesting that I think this story is going to continue to evolve as Disney tries to find, and Paramount Pictures and Fox and everybody else tries to find different ways to release movies. I think a lot of kind of like we've seen legacy media be disrupted by Facebook, and there's all kinds of craziness on that. And now the New York Times is behind a paywall and everybody's scrambling to try to find a way to make money or change their business model. Disney's always doing the same thing. They're always innovating. But I also think there's going to be a lot of this weird tension over the next couple of years between actors, the Screen Actors Guild, the Producers Guild, the Editors Guild, on how they're paid under the traditional model versus maybe this new model that we're seeing ourselves go to. And it reminds me, I used to work at the Washington Mutual Bank that was inside of Vaughn's grocery store that was like 5 blocks from Disney Studios in Burbank. So obviously Disneyland is down in Orange County, but the studios where everything gets made and all the executives are and basically all the people that make the Disney machine move is located in Burbank. And I used to work in the bank right down the street. So it was funny because I would simultaneously talk to a lot of Disney, I wouldn't call them executives, but middle management. These are people that were making 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 grand a year, something like that. Really great money to work in the entertainment industry. And I would see them. We would, this is back in the day when people would actually bring in a physical paycheck in the early 2000s to the bank. So they would bring in their paycheck or they'd have customer service issues. And we had extended hours at that grocery store branch. So I just knew a lot of people, did a lot of loans for people that worked at Disney. But then I would also see the people in the area who were subcontractors for Disney. So they were the graphic artist. They were the person that got the, temporary trash contract. They were the people that ran the air conditionings that kept all the celluloid film at a certain, price point or temperature, or not a certain price point, at a certain temperature so that that very important original film wouldn't be destroyed, right? So I knew the people from Disney, and I knew the people that were the subcontractors and the people that were kind of in the middle working for Disney. And sure enough, subcontractors would get a contract from Disney and they would be like, oh, this is awesome. I landed Disney. This is the mothership. This is the Titanic. I've made it. Their pay scale is great, whatnot. And sure enough, 6 months or 12 months later, they would be pissed because Disney is a giant corporation. It has a lot of bureaucrats. It has a lot of bureaucracy. And they are aggressive with their vendors in like, oh, hey, and by the way, this is what I've heard. This is what I've heard. I don't want our YouTube channel to get canceled for this. This is what I have heard firsthand from people that have worked with Disney, and I've seen their pay stubs and contracts and stuff while I was doing loans for them to kind of substantiate this. It's like a graphic artist would say like, oh man, I got this awesome $70,000 project with Disney. And then Disney would slow pay them, and then they would get their lawyers involved, and then they would say, well, thanks for the work, but we only feel like we're going to pay you $45,000, take it or fight the Death Star, which is Disney and all of our lawyers, and they would just have to take it, right? And so I think a lot of subcontractors, I think a lot of actors, I think they all get screwed by Disney, because at the end of the day, Disney is the mouse, they're the happiest place on earth, but they are a giant, giant, giant corporation who is beholden to their stockholders and are always trying to make more money, right? And so I hope Scarlett Johansson wins. I hope she gets her fair share of the revenue from Disney Plus. I hope she gets her residuals or her points in her back end, and we'll just see how this story develops, right? Because I think Disney is going to be in hot water with a lot of different aspects of how movies are made and the traditional pay structure based on what they're kind of experimenting with on Disney Plus. And at the end of the day, you heard it here first, I think their Disney Plus strategy is ridiculous. I think they should go exclusive release in the theater and then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, release on Disney Plus. I think what they're doing accidentally is they're catering to their more left-leaning audience, or the woke section of their audience, or the progressive side of their audience who still does not feel comfortable going out in public, or doesn't want to sit in the movie theater, which, by the way, if you have health concerns or you're not vaccinated, great, don't go to the movie theater. But I think they're playing to that audience, and they're forgetting that 50% of the country wants to go out to movies, right? So give them early access and then give everybody access 2 or 3 weeks later. I think that delayed strategy, I think it would actually make them more money, but who am I? I digress.